All right, shalom, Hebrews. This the Israelite Brotherhood. This the Israelite Brotherhood, and I need to touch up on this subject. It's finna come a time that we finna have to rewrite our history because we waking up and the history that's been presented to us is not real. It's like a lot of us, the majority of us, be using Jewish history to try to explain Hebrew Israelite history. And I'm going to explain that. It's a such thing as Jewish history, and we can't fault the Jews for creating the history and kind of like did the things that they did when our heritage was blotted out. When we ran up off the land, we abandoned our heritage to some Babylonian scribes. I'm gonna need everybody to ride with me one day on this because it's gonna come a time that you finna have to have trusted sources of information. You finna have to have trusted sources of information, and you finna have to make the distinction between these groups that's using Jewish history trying to pass it off as Hebrew Israelite history. See, we got to fade that out because we got to come into heritage and be the people who we supposed to be. And we can't be the people we supposed to be using Jewish history. You see, in a lot of groups, 85% of the groups are using Jewish history in some form or some fashion. And the Jews are going to be the people that we abandon our heritage to. Is two groups that all, Jews or people that, practice the Jewish faith come from. And that's the Sephardi groups and Ashkenazi. And we abandon our heritage to them in the book of Jeremiah. The book of Jeremiah gonna show how the 99% went into Africa and we never returned back from Africa. Those are facts. And history show that. You know what I'm saying? We never returned back, from Africa after going into Africa saying that we was gonna worship the Egyptian religion. That's like I say, you're gonna have to trust uh, uh groups and make a distinction between the Hebrew Israelite organization that's showing Jewish history and the Hebrew Israelite organization that's just showing Israelite history. And if you're going to show Israelite history, it's just going to have to be the Tanakh only, because when we abandoned heritage, we didn't have the scribes to continue our history and write all these fabulous stories and myths that exist about our heritage. That's like the exiles from Babylon gonna be the last scribes, the last people to hold our history and write it and chronicleize it. Gonna be the prophet Ezra and Nehemiah. Ezra was a scribe, and they chronicleize our last history, and then they sin so bad the Greeks come in and got them. Okay, but let's go back in history. I want to deal with one of the main myths that a lot of the Hebrew Israelite organizations be, pushing, and that's that 10 law tribe mess. And what kills that 10 law tribe mess instantly is Second Chronicles chapter 30. You dealing with King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah, this is gonna be 7 years after the Assyrians took the fighting tribes. They took the fighters only because they was starting to have trouble from the Babylonians. You see, the prophet Jonah was sent to Nineveh, to Assyria, to try to get them right around about 760 BC. And they continued to sin and wasn't doing right. Well, Judah hired the Assyrians and we hired Syria. We was having proxy wars with each other. The tribes of Israel was the northern kingdom was trying to take over the southern kingdom, and the southern kingdom was trying to take over the northern kingdom. The Tanakh is full of that history, how we treated each other and how we was at war with each other. But basically, the descendants of King David and the people in Judah held down the law, whereas the northern kingdom followed Jeroboam with that Egyptian religion. The Egyptians, sent, Jeroboam out of Egypt with 2 golden calves. The the tribe of Ephraim were kin to the Egyptians. This go back to way when Joseph was in Egypt. I'm gonna try to touch up on that. But dealing with that myth, the 10 lost tribes, if you look at Second Chronicles chapter 30, you'll see that King Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters also unto Ephraim and Manasseh that they should come to the house of the Elohim at Jerusalem for the Passover unto the Elohim Yah of Israel. And then he go on to talk about, where he sent the letter. He sent the letter throughout the whole, Israel, from Beersheba to Dan. And as you read down and you get to verse 6, Second Chronicles chapter 30 verse 6, you'll see it says, so the post went with the letters from the king and his princes throughout all Israel and Judah according to the commandment of the king, saying, ye children of Israel, turn again unto the Elohim Yah of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, and he will return to the remain of you that are escaped out of the hands of the kings of Assyria. You see, so he telling you that the Israelites escaped the Assyrians. That one verse killed that 10 lost tribe myth. That one verse, Second Chronicles chapter 30 verse 6, killed that 10 lost tribe myth instantly. Who all escaped from the Assyrians. And then he go on down to to name the tribes as you keep reading. When you get down to verse 18, it says, for the multitude of the people, even many of Ephraim, Manasseh, Ishkar, Zebulun, had not cleansed themselves, yet they did eat the Passover, otherwise that it was written. King Hezekiah asked the Creator to forgive them. They wasn't clean, and they still, came to the Passover dinner. But if you get to Second Chronicles, Second Chronicles chapter 30, verse 10, that's what I should have showed you at first before 18. But 10 says, so the post passed from the city to city throughout all the country of Ephraim, Manasseh, even unto Zebulun, but they laughed them to scorn and mocked them. Nevertheless, diverse of Asher and Manasseh and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. So that Assyrian war must have not been nothing for all the tribes to still been there, and for some of the tribes to still have a stiff neck and act funny after the Creator did send those Assyrians in to take the fighters. The fighters could have been stationed throughout the whole northern kingdom. The Assyrians needed them because they were starting to have trouble, and I'm gonna show you who they were starting to have trouble with. Everything is in a Tanakh, but if you go to First Chronicles chapter 5, First Chronicles chapter 5, verse 18, you will see the sons of Reuben and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, violent men, able to bear buckler and sword, and to shoot with bow, and skillful in war, were 444,703 that went out to the war. All right, and then as you get down to First Chronicles chapter 5 verse 26, you will see, and the Elohim of Israel, and the Yah of Israel stirred up the spirit of Paul, king of Assyria, and the spirit of Talicapazer, king of Assyria, and he carried them away, even the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half tribe of Manasseh, and brought them unto the Haller and Harbor and Hur, and to the river Gazan unto this day. Okay, some years later, that's going to be where the Babylonians took prophet Ezekiel, and the rest of the Israelites that was taken during the Babylonian captivity, took them to the same river. But you see, those are the people that the Assyrians need. You know what I'm saying? Because they were starting to have trouble. And if you go to the prophet Num, you'll see this is in 697 BC. The prophet Num prophesies Assyria's destruction. But before then, if you go to chapter this is gonna be chapter 20, Isaiah chapter 20, and you're gonna see that prophet Isaiah said that it would be a highway from Assyria to Egypt. This is in 25 BC. This is going to be 3 years before those Sephardi Jews was placed in our land. And if you read down, this is during the this was before the Assyrians, attacked the northern kingdom. And you'll see that it says, all right, that's going to be verse 19. All right. All right. And the Elohim said, like as many as my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefooted 3 years for a sign and wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian prisoners in the Ethiopian captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, even their buttocks uncovered, to their shame. All right, those same Ethiopians and Egyptians that was taken to Egypt, they was taken during the Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom. And those people who went to Assyria when that myth was created saying that the Hebrews was taken to the Americas and all through this magic water pole, well, those Ethiopians and Egyptians would have had to been taken too. You see what I'm saying? All right, but if you go to all right, this is gonna be Isaiah 19, and then if you read, it says, all right, 19:23. In that day shall there be a highway out of Egypt to Assyria. The Syrians shall come into Egypt, and the Egyptians into Syria. And the Egyptians shall serve with the Assyrians. In that day Israel shall be the third with Egypt and with Assyria, even a blessing in the midst of the land, whom the Elohim of hosts shall bless, saying, blessed be Egypt and my people, and Assyria the work of my hand, and Israel mine inheritance. Okay, during the Satai period. This is before the Assyrians' destruction. The Assyrians defeated the Egyptians. They the first to defeat the Egyptians, the first occupying force from another nation to defeat the Egyptians. All right, and then they installed the Mishwish on the throne. That's gonna be Necho in his line. All right, it was a communication between Egypt and the Egyptians, because the Egyptians was helping the Assyrians during the Babylonian War. And if you go to Nehemiah, not Nehemiah, but the prophet Num. All right, and if you go to the prophet Num, you're gonna see, all right, prophet Num. See, it did go right to these. All right, if you go to the prophet Num, this is around about 697 BC. You're going to see that he says, all right, this is going to be the prophet Num chapter 2 verse, no, this is going to be the prophet Num chapter 3 verse 8 through 9. Art thou better than populous No, that was situated among the rivers, that had the waters round about it, whose rampart was the sea, and her wall was from the sea? Ethiopia and Egypt were her strength, and it was infinite. Put in Libya were thy helpers, yet she was carried away. All right, the Egyptians, the Egyptians did trade with the Assyrians, and the people in the Mesopotamia area were kin to the Egyptians. You see what I'm saying? So it would make sense that the Assyrians would go and get the Egyptians for help in their last days. So those Hebrews that was taken to Assyria during the Assyrian wars, they come back home. They came back home because the Assyrians had took Egypt over just before they was defeated in 612 BC. Okay, if you go to Second Chronicles chapter 34, you'll see under King Hezekiah, great grandson, King Josiah, how he cleaned up all Israel, the whole kingdom. And this is around about 638 BC. So if the northern kingdom was taken away, it would be impossible for him to have cleaned up the northern kingdom. And he mentioned all the tribes that's not mentioned during his great grandfather's time, King Hezekiah. See, that's like if you get to Second Chronicles chapter 34, verse 6. And so did he in the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim, Simon, even unto Naphtali with their mattocks round about. So he cleaned up the whole Israel, and those Israelites were still there. Okay, it's a known fact that if we was taken to the Americas, that we would have had to have us some sheeps and goats. You know, sheep and goat was part of our culture. We couldn't do without it. We had sheep and goats since our father Israel, Jacob, was a master herder and breeded sheeps and goats masterfully. You see what I'm saying? And we couldn't do without that because they was part of our culture and rituals. And we know that no sheeps and goats were found in the Americas are not indigenous to the Americas, and that the Europeans, the Sephardi Jews from Spain, the conquistadors brung all that stuff over. You see, they brung all that stuff over from Spain and sailed to South America. You know, they went down the coast of North Africa, West Africa, and then got on them little islands and stuff, and then Cape Verde, and then shot on over to South America, and then worked their way up. But they brung sheep, goats, cattle, and horses. The natives didn't have none of that. They was hunters and gatherers. And it's a known fact that all the Hebrews that was at home during King Hezekiah time, this is 7 years after the Assyrians supposed to have took everybody away, and during King Josiah times that everybody was there. And the next event would be the Babylonian Wars. You know, that happened immediately because we wouldn't stop doing that Egyptian worship. We wouldn't stop doing that Egyptian worship. And if you go to the book of Jeremiah first, this showed that everybody went into Africa, all the tribes, but that 1%. But that 1% during the Babylonian Wars, everybody was pushed to Judah because it was like a fence city, a fence wall. Turn right to it. All right. If you go to Second Kings, Second Kings, chapter 25, verse 26, and it says, "And all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies arose and came to Egypt, for they was afraid of the Chaldeans." You see what I'm saying? And the Chaldean relatives gonna be the people that was placed in Samaria in 722 BC during the Assyrian Wars. They placed some scribes in our land that was responsible for Babylonian history. You see, these people was responsible for Babylonian history, and those are the Sephardi Jews, the Sephardim, Sephardic, and Sephardi. Root name is Sephardim. That's the Hebrew name. And we abandon our heritage to them in the book of Jeremiah. You know, this gonna be like 134 years after they was placed in our land, where they were scribes. They were scribes from Babylon, and they was responsible for Babylonian history by like 2,000 years before we Hebrews even became a nation or people, the 12 tribes. These people was writing and had administrations and governments and everything, lawyers, judges, and everything from the Amorites covenant that they had pre-Israelite, you know what I'm saying, pre our origin. You know, the Creator blessed the Amorites. They was all messed up. So I got videos explain that. And the Creator gave them a civilization, and they turned wicked. And Sodom and Gomorrah are the byproducts of that. Well, that Amorite iniquity went on into the day, and that's going to be this false history that's been given to the world about the Israelites' history. Well, they are responsible for that because after we went into Africa in the book of Jeremiah to do the Egyptian religion, we left everything to them people. We left everything to the Sephardi's that was placed in our land in 722 BC when the northern kingdom was on Egyptian religion, fresh on it still from Jeroboam days from 931 BC. Okay, those people start writing our history after we went into Africa and after the exiles were destroyed. Because the exiles come home in 538 BC, the Persians were defeated. The Persians defeated the Babylonians and allowed them to come home. Well, they sin so bad that the Greeks come in and destroyed the Persians. And that ended Hebrew history right there. We couldn't write no more. All the scribes gone, dead, and gone. That's the end of our history. And then Jewish history started. And I could show the Ptolemies, the Lycimus, the Ptolemies, and all these Greek pharaohs that claimed that they was Jewish and had a Jewish heritage. Traced to the people in the promised land that we had abandoned our heritage to. So it's a lot going on. We're going to have to rewrite our history, and you Hebrews going to have to trust trusted sources of Hebrew organizations that's not using Jewish history to explain Hebrew Israelite history. You're going to have to start making that distinction. And when you run across groups that's teaching Jewish history, then you're going to have to back up from them. And you can't participate in that, because if so, you're participating in false history, foolery. It's history that was created to keep us out of heritage. And that's going to be all the myths and lies. If you go to the Israelite Brotherhood archives on YouTube, you'll basically start to understand the difference between Jewish history and Hebrew Israelite history. We the Hebrews that broke the covenant in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 44, verse 15, 16, 17, and 18. The whole Hebrew nation say that they was through with the covenant and that we didn't want nothing else to do with the law. And the reason that all our troubles was happening to us is because we wasn't doing the Egyptian religion. And we took off into Egypt, man, and we abandoned the covenant. And that's how all those myths and lies sprung up. And all the groups and people who claim Israelite heritage that didn't go into Africa, heritage gonna basically come from those myths and lies that was created long ago. Man, before we even, got to the point, of understanding who we are. Them folks, we were slaves and messed up in Africa for like 1600 years, wandering around, and we ain't know nothing about that we was the children of Israel, because we had abandoned heritage for African religion. And you see, we paid the price. All the curses come to pass that Prophet Moses spoke about. But we have to understand the difference between Jewish history and Hebrew Israelite history. And you're going to have to find